So let's talk about Suzerain, and this is going to be a difficult review because there's so much stuff to cover, and it's such an unusual game, and I mean that in a good way. This is one I had actually thought about doing a stream on or a let's play of, but it's a visual novel with no voice acting, and I'm not going to read Nihilism and go down that path and crush the deep state once and for all. There's just so many different opportunities to it, and the characters are very well written. Most of them have an ideological bent to them. As you can see, a lot of them are just kind of represented on this political spectrum. But they're a lot more than that. They have their own particular quirks. They will not act 100% consistent with what their ideology is because they have their own personal pet projects, their own personal opinions, and stuff like that. That might not be entirely ideologically consistent. Like the conservative movement in Swordland is mostly led by women, weirdly enough, and they it's kind of awkward sometimes, the tension between those two different conflicting identity things. So the political situation you inherit is as follows. Colonel Sol had to step down approximately, I guess, 4 years prior to you becoming president because you had the Alfonso presidency. He created the Soulless Constitution of, I think it's 1928, which basically centralizes a lot of power in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has the ability to vote on all legislation. They can impeach the president. They serve for life. They cannot be impeached. They're immune from all criminal prosecution. And basically, he stacked the court with all of his most loyal followers before he left power. The Constitution also gives Sol the unique Member of Honor title, which makes him immune from prosecution indefinitely. Which, if you want, is something you can either give to yourself or you can take away from Sol and put him on trial for the various crimes he committed while leading the military dictatorship. Anton Rain himself, you have a lot of opportunity to customize your approaches to things. Like I said, you can range from being a hardcore feminist to being like a religious social conservative, regardless of whatever background you select. Now, there is a prologue in which you can select your background, what happened during the Civil War, what happened during the Revolution, what was your rise to power like. I personally decided to go with the Young Swords, which is basically a fascist youth group. They still exist. One of the things you can do, actually, and this is just kind of an example of the fun stuff you can get into, is I think it was in this run I made a coalition government with the National Front Party, and the Young Swords became like my militia, and I used them to like kill a bunch of my political opponents. And yes, you can do stuff like that. You can form the secret police, you can form the anti corruption police, you can frame people, you can take bribes, you can start wars, you can join NATO, you can join the Warsaw Pact. Basically, you can do just about anything you want in the game, and it's very, very open ended as to the choices you make, which is, I think, one of the things that makes it so interesting. And I think that's what a lot of people find difficult about it, is you're just kind of overwhelmed with decisions. But I think that's supposed to simulate kind of like real politics. Like, you start off with a budgetary surplus, but you find very quickly you can't fund everything. And if you're trying to fund everything, you rapidly go into massive debt and your economy collapses. And it's very hard to know the first time you're playing through the game. Does it matter if I fund this or not? Do I need to fund this infrastructure project? If I don't give the army more money, if I don't fully fund the army, does that mean they're not going to be able to defend me later in the game and I'm going to lose to a foreign invasion? Probably the biggest landmine is how big the deep state is. Before he resigned, Sol left this massive deep state from the Supreme Court. Some of your ministers are like moles that he left behind, and they can turn on you and try to take you down at any given time if they feel you're not adequately adhering to Colonel Sol's legacy. Part of the issue is they're extremely strict. So, like, they will sometimes remove you even if you are a conservative, if you're not just a massive sycophant. So, maybe to talk a bit more about the situation that Rain inherited. Sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff to cover in this. So during the Soul years, he implemented a centrally planned economy, an authoritarian, basically dominant party system, and a republican constitution. Alfonso tried to reform all of this, but he got removed from. But he completely failed because the deep state took him down, and he got removed from power. And now you've succeeded to the presidency, winning election. So you are the head of the United Swordland Party, which is basically a centrist Big Tent party. There is soulists within it who are conservatives, and then there are also reformists within it who are basically classical liberals. And you'll find managing a Big Tent party is difficult because you'll have people in your party who are like socialists, and you'll have people who are conservatives, and they all kind of hate each other, and you can't please everybody. And because your electorate is so broad, you can't appeal to anyone in particular too much. One of the things that makes it kind of interesting is the conservatives in this game tend to be very anti-free market. They tend to be national conservative, civic nationalists, and want a centrally planned state-run economy. So that can kind of be difficult for me because, as you can see, where I wound up being is I went capitalist soulism. Soulism is basically, in this context, authoritarian conservatism. Soul is very clearly based on Kemal Ataturk, but he's much less socially progressive and he's not particularly secular. I don't think Soul is religious himself, but most religious people within Swordland like Colonel Soul, if that makes sense. He's not very socially progressive, I guess you could say. He has fairly conservative views and that sort of thing. So I was going like authoritarian, conservative, but also capitalist, which puts me largely in the camp of the National Front or the far right party. However, the conservatives will very quickly snake on you if you go too far with your privatization program. At present, there's three political parties within the Grand National Assembly. Once again, nothing. They didn't take that name from Turkey at all. You have United Swordland, which is the Big Tent party you're a part of, which is based on the People's Republican Party. You have the National Movement Party, the National Front, which is based on the Nationalist Movement Party. And they have the Young Swords, which is basically the Grey Wolves. And then you have the Reform Party. I forget what it's actually called. I think it's literally just called the Reformist Party. Or it's like the Democratic People's Party or something like that, which largely consists of classical liberals who want a liberal economy, feminism, and a more democratic society. You also have communists and bloods. The bloods are basically the Kurds of this game. They're a minority that only lives in one part of the country and has a different form of religion than everybody else. They're also extremely liberal and left wing, and they will riot over the drop of a hat. So you can like try to reconcile with them and give them like an autonomous zone, or you can do what I did and just go full balls to the wall, declare a police state, put their region under martial law, and wipe out all the independence movements. You can also ally with Saddam Hussein next door in a joint operation Bear Trap to work together to wipe out the Bloods and the independence movements, and it's all justified under base civic nationalism, and that the Bloods, in their attempt to assert bloodish identity, are violating the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Like you can do shady shit like that in this game. You could use like legalese and stuff to shut down your political opponents. So that's the situation you come to power during. The economy is a complete and total disaster from a combination of Seoul running it as a centrally planned economy, and Alfonso just mass privatizing everything with no kind of plan. Put it in kind of perspective, how I chose to govern economically is, let's say 0 is communism, and let's say 10 is Ancapistan. Seoul is like a 3, Alfonso's like an 8, and I'm about a 6 on the scale, and where I generally favored the market economy and privatization, but I supported government spending into infrastructure, education, healthcare, transit, and just kind of stuff like that to try to help the business economy grow. But I privatized most of like the state-owned enterprises, or at least partially privatize them. Once again, the problem of doing that is you don't really have anybody on your side because the conservatives don't like you because you're privatizing things, and the liberals don't like you in my case because I was passing all of these like anti-minority legislation and transforming the country into a police state. I think in this run I passed the dictator constitution, where I got all of or through a combination of threats and bribery, I was able to get the assembly to pass basically like things that would give me immunity for life from prosecution, absolute veto, no term limits, and just all this other stuff that basically dramatically increased my powers. And in that run, the Supreme Court was coming up against me, but I got the Young Swords to assassinate the head of the Supreme Court. So yeah, as you go through the game, you have to make a whole bunch of different choices. Like at one point, it's do you want to teach creationism or evolution in schools? There's do you want to sign women's rights legislation or veto it? Do you want to pursue capitalism or communism? You get certain bonuses if you're consistent. So if you like reduce taxes and privatize industry, that will be you'll get a consistency bonus for that. The problem is if you're playing a capitalist run, it is a bit harder, I think, to balance the budget, even with privatization. Because there's certain things you can't privatize, or the conservatives and the deep state will try to remove you from power. That is, of course, why blackmail, bribery, secret police, and corruption allegations exist. If people get in your way and you're sufficiently ruthless, you can deal with them. You also very early on can make a deal with the controller of most of the media in Swordland that you'll be his man on the inside. You won't levy any additional taxes or regulations against his company, and in return, he will give you nothing but favorable press coverage. And if there are scandals later on, he will deliberately ban all of his newspapers from publishing about it and just call it fake news in general. So you can do a lot of stuff like that. Now, I guess the other kind of interesting thing is the Cold War aspect to it, because as Turkey in the 1950s, at this point in time, I guess Turkey joined NATO, but at this point, but you're a neutral country. Saul was very much an isolationist and a swordist nationalist. He wanted to have minimal involvement with other countries and tried to pursue autarkic economic policies. So, of the countries around you, some are more allied with the communist faction and some are more allied with the capitalist faction, led by Not America. You are, however, also neighbor to a third world superpower. I think it's pronounced Rummenberg, which is an absolute monarchy that has nuclear weapons and is just way bigger than you. And depending on how the game goes, a lot of times it ends with them invading you and taking over your country. On my first one run through, I lost a war and wound up dying in a Nuremberg dungeon. Now, it is possible to win the war if you modernize your army, you make allies with your neighbors, and you make some right strategic calls. You can actually beat them. And if you win the war, then you get reelected regardless of whatever else happens. There is, however, an alternative that I tend to go with. If you join one of the major superpower blocks, Rumenberg can just not invade you. Because if they invade you, it means going to war with another nuclear armed power. So I've always joined the ATO, which is in no means by no way it's not NATO, it's the ATO. It's the our Arcasian Treaty Organization. It's not the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And it does kind of show you how good a sugar daddy the US was during the Cold War. Because if you like lean westward, and you lean towards Arcasia, they'll give you a whole bunch of foreign investment. They'll give you foreign aid. They'll basically do all this stuff. They'll trade with you. And ultimately, if you are fairly pro them for the duration of the game, the president of Arcasia will come to your country and it's like, hey, do you want to join ATO? And if you just say yes, then you're part of ATO. And he's like, okay, we'll give you some more weapons. We'll send some guys over to like help train you, like to train your guys in modern army and stuff like that. And you're like, what do you want from us? It's just like, you just have to be part of our alliance and fight if we go to war with the communists. In the meantime, though, we're just going to give you a whole bunch of shit. It's like, do you care that I'm running like this dictatorship that's like massacring minorities? He's like, nah, you got your own problems. I got my own problems. So long as you say communism sucks, and you'll support us internationally, we'll give you all this just random stuff. We'll give you tanks, we'll give you jet fighters, we'll give you money, all that kind of thing. Now, you might get, the deep state really does not like this. It's kind of interesting because the deep state and like the military establishment get irritated with you if you side with America, but they won't necessarily overthrow you. If you side with the communists, then you have to basically remove them because they don't like the capitalists, but they despise the communists way more than they do the capitalists. So I almost always wind up joining the ATO. You can also, because that prevents you from being invaded, you could probably just completely defund the army and just rely on America to come in and save the day at the end of the game if it winds up going in that direction. But like I said, there's so many different pathways you can take. I normally will either get... Now, it says neo-solist here, which is basically a conservative who's free market. But in the game, pretty much always people call me a centrist or a radical centrist, which is kind of cool. It is a bit bugged, though, because I think it always calls you a centrist, or it will, like, you can be down here in, like, the reformist camp, and it'll still call you a solist. But overall, I think the game is really good. I enjoy it. There is a DLC coming out where you can play as Rizia, which is a constitutional monarchy, which I'm hyped for. I definitely recommend giving Suzerain a try. It's a little bit difficult, but there's no shame in using a guide, especially for a game that can be as opaque as this one.